Welcome to Sky Women. I'm your host, Dr. Carolyn Moyers, a wife, mom, and board-certified OB-GYN. This is a place to educate, empower, and inspire. Join us each week as we share the power of women's stories. Real women, real stories, real inspiration. Put on your stretchy pants. Let's get going. Welcome, friends, to another episode. It's Wednesday, and so that means another episode of Sky Women. And today I have the pleasure of having a special guest, Dr. Amina Goodwin. She is a practicing internal medicine and infectious disease specialist. So she is double board certified, and she is a health coach who helps career women overwhelmed by all the dietary advice to focus on one thing, and that's sugar. She helps you break up with sugar and make up with your own health, right? And so I saw her on Instagram and I said, what's all this about? I'm going to take a look. And I'm so curious because I put on 10 pounds during COVID working in the hospital, and the snacks that are available are awful, right? And I think all want to eat better. We want to do better, right? We know that we need to improve our health, but our American diet is not set up for success when it comes to eating well. So welcome everyone, Dr. Goodwin. She is going to teach us so much today. Thank you for joining me.
Hello, Dr. Moyers, and to your audience. And I thank you for inviting me on your podcast today.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about this journey. You trained in New York, is that right? And now you're practicing in Mississippi, yes. And you see all this diabetes and yes. You're thinking, you're giving all of this advice and realize I need to take my own advice. I love it when you become the doctor that you need, you become your own hero, and then you yes. teach others. And that's exactly what you're doing.
Yes. So practicing, I found, with infectious diseases that probably at least 50% of my patients would be diabetic and often very uncontrolled. And so one day listening to myself sort of dish out some, advice about cutting out sugar, etc. And then I realized, but the same thing I'm telling the patient to avoid, I have it in my pocket, a big bottle of juice, sweet apple juice with 48 grams of sugar. And so I started realizing, and then I remembered myself saying, to my mother, I hope I never become diabetic because I can't live without sugar. So then I realized to myself, I shouldn't give my patients such a hard time because actually I'm having a hard time also avoiding sugar, right? Mm-hmm. So I started sort of paying attention to my intake. And then maybe around that time, maybe 5, 6, maybe 7 years ago now, the WHO, World Health Organization, came out with some guidance about sugar intake. And they reported that the daily intake of added sugar should be no more than 25 grams per day. And that 25 grams equates to 6 teaspoons because every 4 grams of sugar is equal to 1 teaspoon. So then I realized that right away, my intake was in 1 cup of coffee because I would put like 6 teaspoons of sugar in my coffee. I was like, oh my goodness. And then I started calculating over a couple of days or so how much I was taking and realized that it way, way, way exceeded 24 grams. It was probably more than 100 grams. And so that was quite alarming. And then just becoming more mindful, looking at my patients. And then I realized, okay, actually, I might not be diabetic or have a family history. I might not be struggling with obesity, but all this sugar cannot be right. There must be a reason why the limit should be no more than 6 teaspoons per day.
So teach us then how you went through this journey. How do we get that sugar level down? When cakes and sweets and pies and pastries are always available, how do we do this?
Mm-hmm. So I always thought I would consider myself a healthy person, preparing most of my foods for myself and so on. I kind of grew up vegetarian and you kind of think, vegetarian is a healthy diet. Of course, now, vegetarian is just one diet, but I realized that meat is important and all foods are probably important, but you just kind of need to know how, to sort of, juggle everything. And then the sugar part, right? I realized sugar is so easy to overeat because it tastes so good. So sweet things, you just get that immediate pleasure from sugar. And then it's said that sugar is as addictive as those, street drugs like cocaine and so on. So for me, because I'm kind of a perfectionist, and if I see an actual guideline spelled out, I can visualize it 6 teaspoons per day. So visualizing it like that, I realized, okay, this is just not good for me, right? And so I started to eliminate. Sweet drinks was one, right? I used to drink a lot of sugar. I used to add a lot of sugar to my coffee. And so that was the easiest thing and the thing to give me the biggest decrease right immediately, just cutting out juices. For me, I kind of weaned myself because I think my intake was so large that cold turkey would have just been a bit too stressful for my body. So I started diluting the juices. Apple juice was one of my favorite. I would dilute it half and half and just diluted it more and more until my taste buds got used to not having sweet, right? And then for me, again, I cut down the amount of teaspoons of sugar in my tea or in my coffee. I drink tea and coffee. So I just weaned that off gradually. And then just basically got my taste buds used to the taste of not having sweet things, right? Now I recognize because I've since started coaching persons and helping them with this process. And so, some people wean, but some people can't afford, or it varies. So some people are okay with doing the cold turkey method, right? And, I tend to encourage them to choose like a long weekend, because most persons, especially if the sugar intake is high, they're going to have some withdrawal, some irritability, just cranky feelings, right?
Yeah.
So they're doing it and they have a long weekend to recover. And then even more importantly is helping to, show them or, what to replace the sugar with. Because the big reason for failure a lot of times is, okay, you get rid of sugar, you get rid of sweet drinks, you get rid of cookies, but then you don't know what to eat instead. Right? So things like nuts, right? Because they're just so filling. Nuts are my favorite, any type of nut, right? And then there are things, there's guacamole, little packets now. There's so many convenient things you can get in the store, packets of guacamole, hummus, and then you can use, either vegetable sticks or there even now things like flaxseed crackers. There's just a whole variety of things that you can eat instead, right? Sometimes they're these sort of meat jerky thingies, but you have to be careful, right? Always looking at your labels because so many things have added sugar snuck in, right? So that's kind of me and how I did it. I weaned myself off. It was especially sweetened drinks. And then I just gradually, as time went on, just ate less and less cookies. And, I just realized it wasn't healthy,
So you're saying the first step is just recognizing what is your sugar intake. So paying attention and kind of taking inventory. What's your sugar intake?
Yes.
And then looking at your labels, right? Because I think we get in trouble a lot of times when we don't really pay attention to our packaged food.
Exactly.
I always say stay on the periphery of the grocery store, right? Get your Whole Foods.
Yes.
But when you have packaged food, we're not paying attention to those labels. And even like in your spaghetti sauce, you can have added sugar. And so
precisely.
What else then? We're going to pay attention to our intake. We're going to look at our labels and we're going to choose whole foods, right?
Yes. So, a lot of times we think, it's expensive to eat healthily and so on and so forth. Fruits and vegetables are expensive, right? But the fact is you end up, if you're eating those real wholesome foods from the periphery of the supermarket, you end up feeling satisfied for longer. And so you're not necessarily going to need to eat as frequently, right? When you eat the packaged foods, they're so refined and oftentimes sort of depleted of, the nutrients and vitamins that we need. And so in 1 hour, 2 hours, you're getting hungry, you're eating more again. So just stick with the periphery. Okay, if you don't like to cook, then, in some delis, there's a variety of vegetables. You can buy the vegetables, prepared vegetables. You can buy prepared meats. Again, don't be afraid maybe to ask the people in the deli section to look at labels, because you'd be surprised at how accommodating people will be to show you labels, right? Deli meats, even like some of these sliced meats and so on, they have added sugar. Sliced salmon has added sugar, right? So it's just paying attention to the labels if it's going to be something packaged, right? Condiments are a big, big culprit as well. Like ketchup, probably a serving of ketchup might have 6 grams of sugar in one serving, and most people have more than one serving. So another thing is, yes, that's per serving, but a lot of times we're going to have maybe, for example, 2 cups of cereal rather than 1 cup. So it's double the amount that the label says. So paying attention to labels is definitely something to do.
So let's talk about diet drinks, because somebody's going to say, oh, okay, I don't need to drink, 34 grams of sugar in my apple juice or my soda. So I'm just going to switch to diet. No big deal.
So the diet drinks, there are a lot of artificial sweeteners. More and more natural sweeteners are probably being used, but the classic diet drinks, diet sodas and so on, they would have aspartame, acesulfame, sucralose, and so on. And yes, they don't cause increased blood sugar levels, and so therefore they won't cause that trigger, that insulin trigger, which is kind of what we're trying to avoid, because that's what's driving a lot of the metabolic diseases. But these, in my opinion, because they're manufactured, they're manufactured in a factory, they're not natural, and there are unknowns, right? And then there is, to me, enough evidence pointing towards them potentially being harmful. Like aspartame, for example, as a, it's felt that it's sort of neurotoxic, excitatory, can affect our nerves, right? So I think if we can avoid these artificial sweeteners, overall, our bodies will be better off. Another thing as well with artificial sweeteners is that they still don't help to get you off that need for sweet. And my idea, and what I recommend is that if you can wean yourself off the taste for sweet things altogether, so you're no longer a slave to sweet things, you can go anywhere and you can just drink water, and you don't need to look and search, oh my, I need something sweet, oh my, there's no diet drink, so I have to get something sweet, because you need that sweet taste. So I think I help with weaning off this taste for sweet. Now, saying that, there are other natural sweeteners, 0-calorie sweeteners that are, like I said, natural stevia, right? And monk fruit. So those are 2 natural sweeteners from plants that you can have, right? Again, it doesn't do anything in terms of getting you off the taste for sweet, but I think I would choose those if I were choosing a natural sweetener, right? Another thing, again, talking about labels, sometimes because these natural ones are more expensive than the artificial ones, they're mixed, right? So you have to look at your labels again. And if you're getting a box of monk fruit, you need to make sure it's not, or stevia, so make sure it's not mixed with dextrose or something else, right? Some of them are mixed with a sugar alcohol. It's called erythritol. It's a good alternative as well. Almost 0 calorie, it has minimum amount of calories, minimum effect on blood sugar levels and insulin levels, right? But erythritol is a fairly good alternative as well. But again, looking at labels, and for me, I feel like there's a lot of trickery that goes on with labels. So they have something big and bold, stevia, right? And so you think, this is mainly stevia, right? And then in small print, it says with erythritol in small print. But then you look at the label and you see erythritol is the first ingredient and stevia is the second ingredient. And who knows if erythritol is 75% and stevia 25%, because it's just put there and they don't tell you the percentage. So right. I don't like to be tricked, right? I like to be informed. And I think when we're more informed, then ultimately we make better decisions overall.
Absolutely. So I mean, this is all fascinating. It's interesting, but we got to get buy-in, right? Why is sugar so bad for our bodies?
So the thing about sugar, and the big thing, I'll just summarize it. We say sugar, but ultimately it breaks down. Well, sucrose is a combination of fructose and glucose. And the one we're concerned about fructose, so I'll come to that. But glucose essentially into our bloodstream, it triggers the insulin response, okay? So we need insulin to metabolize the glucose, put it into our blood cells for them to utilize it as energy. Glucose is a form of energy, right? If we have high glucose levels in our blood because we're eating almost all the time, very frequently, right? So the glucose is always there, but our body needs it to be at a steady state, right? Because if your sugar is too high, it's going to poison your cells and shifts of fluid and so on. So then eating all the time sweet things, drinking all the time sweet things, sugar is always going up, 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 up. And so we always triggering insulin. Pancreas always has to produce insulin. And so we have all this insulin. And if it's bombarded, the cells of the body are bombarded by this insulin chronically, eventually they get numb to the response of insulin. Okay? And so what you have, higher and higher levels of insulin because it's not working as effectively. We call that insulin resistance, right? Mm-hmm. And so you're doing more and more and more. And these high levels of insulin, right, are what promote things like excess weight gain, because insulin is like a pro-growth hormone. It's a fat storage hormone. So you have insulin promoting fat storage, promoting growth of cells, right? It's anabolic, right? So you have all these fat cells growing. And then there's even now more evidence looking at insulin and how it promotes the growth of certain cancers, okay? Yes. So this is what is going on, right? And then even contributing to issues with the ovaries, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and all these things, right? So that's what happens ultimately with insulin. Now, eventually, you have so much insulin resistance that you just cannot keep up with the levels. It's not working to keep the blood glucose levels down. And so you develop diabetes because now the sugar levels just stay up. So you could get prediabetes, which I like to say prediabetes is just diabetes in the early stage where it can be controlled without medications, right? But it's on the spectrum of diabetes. So you have insulin resistance, and then you have prediabetes, and then ultimately type 2 diabetes.
Yes.
So that is what sugar does ultimately.
So I'll tell you my most interesting case recently of diagnosing a young female with prediabetes was related to her recurrent yeast infections. We had no other cause for her to have recurrent vulvovaginal candidiasis, yeast
Mhm.
infections.
Mhm.
So we tested her for diabetes, and sure enough, she's in that pre-diabetic range.
Yes.
And so then our next step was not just eat better, right?
Yes. Yes.
Because
Exactly.
everyone says eat better, eat less sugar, right? It was, how do we connect you with a nutritionist to
Mhm.
create a plan to
Mhm.
look truly at what you're eating and
Mhm.
adjust accordingly, right?
Mhm.
Because I think
Yeah.
it's a very personalized plan. And in one
Exactly.
doctor's visit, you're not going to get through, you know,
Mhm. Oh, not at all.
yeah, all of those details. So I think that's where a nutritionist comes in really well, and
Mhm.
collaborating and care.
Mhm. Mhm. And that's so interesting too, how you said that, you picked up prediabetes from recurrent yeast infection. So one might think that, oh, your sugars are normal. This can't be anything to do with diabetes, but everybody responds differently to different levels of sugar. So we have normal ranges in the lab, but normal is for the average person, right? A
Right.
slightly, something that's normal, it's in the normal range, but it could actually be high enough to cause issues, actual clinical issues with some people. So the normal range is a guide. And, obviously you were astute enough to look and see, hey, something is going on here. Which is why, again, I say prediabetes is diabetes, but just in a range that does not yet require prescription medications necessarily.
Right. Good
Yeah.
point.
Mhm.
Okay. So tell me about your program and how you help women.
So essentially, I have a 10-week program. It's an online coaching program where I meet with clients once a week via Zoom, and essentially we go through a process where we see where exactly where they're at with sugar, take their personal preferences, right, and their situation. Because some people don't want to cook, right? So we have to now think about, okay, what kind of restaurants, what choices you're going to make in restaurants, and so on, right? And then those who cook and just kind of taking an inventory of what they like, going through different food lists, and then coming up with plans for them with eating, right? Providing support about, again, their foods, labels, helping them to learn exactly how to interpret these labels, right? And so we just provide that support and relearning, right? A new approach to food and eating, and support them for the 10 weeks until this becomes like normal and automatic for them. And, it's amazing how just cutting sugar, right? A lot of times people struggle with weight. Weight is a big thing. I know it's maybe cosmetic, but there are health issues as well. But weight is a big reason sometimes why people really are prompted to do something.
Yeah.
And they are often quite shocked at how many pounds can be dropped just from cutting sugar, right? And then we get into other aspects like starches, because starches are big, and that was one of my problems too, but refined starches are a massive culprit because it's essentially sugars digest into the bloodstream. So we go through all the things about, replacing the simple starches with more complex ones, even little tips and tricks like preceding when in your meals, have a salad or have some bowl of vegetables before you eat your main meal to reduce the overall glycemic index of a meal, right? So my thing is not to necessarily totally restrict things. You can almost eat everything, but you have to know how to eat it, right? So just like that, eat a bowl of salad before your food. Eat some good have half your plate as vegetables, like good crunchy vegetables, right? And okay, you might not want to give up rice altogether, but hey, you're having a lot of vegetables to offset the glycemic effect of your rice. Okay, if you want to have a little dessert, have it after a wholesome meal, right? Don't eat it first, right? Never have dessert on an empty stomach, right? So we don't restrict, because restriction doesn't work. Like we all know it. Otherwise, everybody would be perfect, right?
Well, that's why fad diets don't last, right? And you try 20 of them,
exactly.
right?
They're not sustainable.
Right.
They're not sustainable, right?
Yes.
So,
this is the message I preach all the time. It's like, it has to be sustainable changes. So we have to look at the culprits in our diet and how do we make those shifts? And it can be small incremental things like decreasing the amount of sugar intake by half, right? And then all of a sudden you've lost 5 pounds and you will wonder, how was it so simple? So, and on salads, I love salads, but I love all the things in them, right? So I'm going to put avocado and some nuts and all kinds of veggies and maybe some beans or peas and just make it really hearty and delicious. And it is so filling.
And that's excellent. That's excellent too. Putting all those things with it, because you have your healthy fats from your avocado, you have some amount of healthy fats and protein from your nuts and so on. So sometimes too, because the teaching the focus has been on calories. So sometimes people get worried, like, oh no, I'm going to put all this avocado, all these nuts. And I had one client tell me once when I was talking about salad, she's like, oh really? But that's just so rich. Like I thought like that was going to be too much. I said, no, that is what's going to keep you satisfied.
Right.
You know, that's what's going to keep you going for another 3, if not 4 hours, all those rich, real things. When it comes to food, if it's real and wholesome, it was not processed, you can look at it and tell exactly what it is. That's always going to be better than something that's packaged and processed in a factory.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So tell my listeners where they can find you.
So I'm on social media. On Instagram, I'm Dr. Amina Goodwin. So that's DRAMINA GOODWIN. And on Facebook, Amina Goodwin MD. I couldn't get them both on the same. It's both the same. And I have a YouTube channel, Amina Goodwin MD, and I'm on TikTok. But it's basically the same content. It depends on where you prefer, but TikTok, Amina Goodwin MD.
I'll link those in the show notes so that others can find you.
Sure. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking with you today, Dr. Moyers.
All right, Sky community, thank you for listening to another episode. This episode was sponsored by Sky Women's Health. As a reminder, we're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and we help relieve back pain and pelvic pain in pregnancy and beyond. If you are pregnant and having pain and you feel like you have no reliable way to relieve it, look us up at skywomenshealth.com. Request an appointment, and we'll call to get you scheduled. As a board-certified OB-GYN with a Neuromusculoskeletal Medicine Fellowship, I help you realign with hands-on drug-free treatment and relieve pain on the spot without medication. We'll help you maintain these results through your pregnancy and postpartum period. Every pregnant person deserves this, and we are so excited to serve you. You can find us on our website, as mentioned, or on social at Sky Women's Health, or you can call the office at 817-915-9803. That's it for today. Until next week, be well.